With her golden hair glistening under the sun and that unforgettable slow-motion walk on the beach, Bo Derek became the ultimate Hollywood fantasy. Her role in 101979 didn't just make her famous, it turned her into a symbol of perfection, desire, and the American dream itself. But behind that dream was a nightmare only she could see. At just 16, Bo entered a relationship that would define and nearly destroy her. While the world saw beauty and fame, she was living in the shadow of control, guilt, and the pressure of being a fantasy that never belonged to her. Why did Hollywood's golden girl disappear when her star burned brightest? What secret did she carry all those years in silence? This video reveals the full, never-before-told truth behind Bo Derek's rise, fall, and the haunting cost of being a legend too soon. Before she became the woman every camera desired, Bo Derek was just Mary Kathleen Collins, a quiet California girl who learned early that beauty could both open doors and close them forever. Born in Long Beach in 1956, she grew up in the golden light of the Pacific, but her childhood wasn't as serene as the view outside her window. Her parents' marriage fractured when she was still finding her voice. Her father, Paul, worked in the sailboat industry, often away for long stretches. Her mother, Norma, was a makeup artist in the glittering world of show business. Between the distant father and the mother absorbed in Hollywood faces, Bo grew up between two worlds, unseen in both. When her parents divorced, that fracture widened into something permanent. Her mother remarried a Hollywood stuntman, bringing cameras, chaos, and strangers into their home. For a teenage girl searching for stability, the sudden exposure to adult glamour was intoxicating and dangerous. Bo began skipping school, vanishing for days, chasing a sense of belonging she never found at home. That craving, to be noticed, to be chosen, became the silent engine of her life. It was this hunger that made her vulnerable when, at 16, she met director John Derek, a man 3 decades older who promised not love, but attention. For a girl who had spent her life unseen, that promise was irresistible. No one around her stopped it. The adults who should have protected her were too distracted or too dazzled. By the time they noticed, she was already gone, physically and emotionally. Years later, Bo would look back on those days and whisper in interviews, "I hate myself when I think about it." But back then, there was no hate, only the dangerous sweetness of finally being seen. And from that wound, born of silence, neglect, and hunger for love, her legend and her downfall began. Hollywood has a way of turning innocence into spectacle. When 10 premiered in 1979, the world met Bo Derek, not the quiet teenager who once disappeared from school, but the golden woman running across a beach in slow motion, hair blowing, skin shining like sunlight itself. That single scene made her a global obsession. Overnight, Bo Derek became a brand, an image, an impossible ideal. But few knew that behind that fantasy stood a man with a camera and control. John Derek, her husband and former matinee idol, had crafted her into the woman the world desired. He wrote the story, directed the shots, decided the lighting, the angles, the costumes, and most of all, the limits. Bo was not merely acting in his movies, she was living in them. When 10 grossed over $74 million at the box office, an enormous number for 1,979, every studio in Hollywood wanted her. Magazines called her the perfect 10. Photographers fought for her time, and she became one of the most photographed women in the world. But while the world saw opportunity, John saw danger. He feared that any new role would mean losing control of his creation. So instead of embracing the system that had made her famous, Bo withdrew deeper into John's vision. He directed her next films: Tarzan, The Ape Man, 1981, Bolero, 1984. Both commercial failures, but each one a further attempt to immortalize her body. Critics mocked the movies, calling them soft-core fantasies disguised as art. Bo's image, once empowering, was now being dismantled, one headline at a time. The price of fame was isolation. Bo stopped attending major Hollywood events, avoided interviews, and rarely appeared without John. He became her manager, director, husband, and gatekeeper. Friends who tried to reach her said it felt like speaking through glass. She was there, but not really. Still, Bo remained loyal. In her eyes, the man who discovered her had given her everything. A name, a career, a world. Yet, in giving him that devotion, she slowly surrendered something she never realized she was losing: herself. Every movie John made with her pushed boundaries further. Scenes grew bolder, riskier, more intimate, until the controversy drowned out any artistry. Bo became the subject of moral outrage and tabloid curiosity. Headlines no longer called her the perfect 10. They called her the mistress of scandal. In is of red rolls, but beneath the noise, there was another truth. Bo was exhausted. She once confessed that fame didn't feel like success, it felt like exposure. In her words, people stopped seeing me. They only saw the image. In is of red rolls. As critics tore her apart, Bo's career began to close in on itself. The more the world desired her, the less space she had to breathe. Behind closed doors, she was no longer the girl chasing love. She was the woman trapped by the reflection of her own myth. By the mid-1980s, John Derek's films had alienated Hollywood, and offers stopped coming. Bo's name, once a promise of perfection, became shorthand for failure. Yet she never publicly blamed him. When asked, she simply smiled and said, "It was our choice." In is of red rolls, but that smile hid the cost, the sacrifice of youth, the silence of ambition, the surrender of her own story. And though the spotlight had made her immortal, it had also erased the woman behind the light. By the time the world began questioning her, Bo Derek had already stopped questioning anything. For nearly 2 decades, her life revolved around John Derek. Her mentor, lover, director, and shadow. Their relationship had always been controversial. A teenage girl molded by a man 3 decades older who left his wife to be with her, fled to Europe to avoid prosecution, and rebuilt his career on her youth. What began as devotion quietly evolved into dependence. And then, isolation. Inside the high walls of their Malibu home, everything seemed calm. Outside, the world mocked her. Tabloids called her the trophy student, the teenage bride who became the master's muse. Critics accused John of exploitation, of turning his wife into an object. But Bo defended him fiercely. "He didn't force me," she said. "I chose this life. If we doing friend. Yet, between those words lay a silence so heavy, it almost sounded rehearsed. John controlled every element of their existence. The projects, the finances, even who she spoke to. Friends described him as charming but territorial. Once, an interviewer asked Bo about independence. She smiled and said, "I'm not sure what that feels like." Behind the smile was exhaustion. The exhaustion of being forever defined by someone else's vision. Each movie they made became another mirror of their power dynamic. Bolero 1984 pushed Bo into scandalous territory. Nude scenes, controversy, bans in several countries. John insisted it was art. Bo called it our experiment. The result was humiliation. The film flopped, critics ridiculed it, and her career imploded. But even then, she stayed. Why? Perhaps because leaving would mean facing the truth. That her entire adult identity had been built around a man's camera. Perhaps because she still believed love was supposed to hurt a little, as long as it felt like belonging. When journalists pressed her about the moral line between muse and victim, she didn't lash out. She paused and quietly said, "He was my teacher, my whole world." If we doing friend, there were whispers of emotional control. How John would review every script, reject offers that might corrupt her image, and insist that the world doesn't deserve her. Bo, who once longed to be seen, was now hidden, preserved, framed, untouchable. Over time, the glamour turned ghostly. The house filled with cameras that no longer rolled, film canisters that would never be developed. John's health declined, and the empire he built around her began to crumble. Bo spent years nursing him, turning down work, watching her fame fade with his strength. When he died in 1998, Bo was 42. The tabloids called her a widow of a legend, but she described herself differently, like a bird who forgot how to fly. One nay was Zitter. For the first time since she was 16, there was no one telling her where to stand, what to wear, or who to be. But freedom, after decades of obedience, can feel like loss. Bo later admitted, "I didn't know who I was without him." Those words weren't bitter. They were haunted. Because love, the thing she had chased her entire life, had turned into the same cage she once mistook for safety. And in that paradox, between devotion and destruction, the most tragic chapter of Bo Derek's story quietly closed. After John Derek's death in 1998, the silence in Bo's Malibu home was almost unbearable. For years, her life had been choreographed. Camera angles, wardrobe choices. Even her words were part of a script someone else had written. When that script ended, there was no director left to tell her what to do next. Hollywood had already moved on. The new generation of starlets, youthful, unapologetic, and digitally polished, made Bo's soft, sunlit image feel like a relic. Casting agents stopped calling. Talk shows wanted nostalgia, not truth. For a woman once seen as the embodiment of perfection, aging under the public eye was its own slow disintegration. "I was the fantasy once," she said years later, "and fantasies don't age well." One nay was Zitter, but the true collapse wasn't fame. It was identity. She had built her entire life on being someone's creation. Without John, she had to rebuild from ashes what it meant to be herself. The process was brutal. There were rumors of depression, of withdrawal from friends, of a woman haunted by her own reflection. "When you've lived inside someone else's dream for so long," she told a magazine, "waking up feels like heartbreak." One nay was Zitter. Still, Bo didn't turn to substances or scandal. Her self-destruction was quieter, a slow fading from the world. She retreated from Los Angeles, kept her phone off for weeks, spent mornings on horseback in solitude. The once photographed goddess now wore jeans and wide-brimmed hats to avoid recognition. What had been a face for millions became a mask of privacy. There were nights, she later admitted, when the loneliness felt like a physical ache. She kept John's photos framed around the house, not out of obsession, but out of fear. That without memory, even pain would disappear. As years passed, the industry that once devoured her moved on entirely. Bo's name reappeared only in retrospectives about the sex symbols of the 70 seconds or lists of forgotten Hollywood icons. But beneath that fading fame, something unexpected began to happen. Bo started to heal. She found refuge in activism, animal welfare, veteran support, and quiet humanitarian work. It wasn't about being seen anymore, she said. It was about doing something that mattered. Slowly, the woman who once lived through lenses began finding life without them. In 2002, she met John Corbett, an actor known for Sex and the City and My Big Fat Greek Wedding. He was nearly 2 decades younger, and yet, unlike the man who once shaped her, Corbett offered no control, no cage. "He lets me be," Bo said simply. They kept the relationship private for almost 20 years before quietly marrying in 2020. It was the first time Bo had chosen a love not for safety, but for peace. Still, scars remained. In interviews, she spoke about her struggles with aging and pain. Not emotional, but physical. Arthritis, chronic neck injuries, the toll of years under hot lights and staged perfection. "My body reminds me every day of what I've been through," she said. It's humbling. The woman once worshipped for her beauty was learning to live with the body time refused to idealize. There were no rehab stints, no overdose headlines, no public meltdowns. But Bo's downfall was more existential. It was the slow realization that she had been built to be adored, not understood. That her fame, so intoxicating in youth, had erased the possibility of being seen as real. Looking back, she described her younger self with a mix of pity and tenderness. "I thought fame would fill something inside me," she said. But it just made the emptiness echo louder. Those words cut deeper than any scandal could. They revealed a woman who survived not because she was perfect, but because she finally accepted imperfection. In the decades since, Bo Derek has lived a life of deliberate quiet. She rides horses at dawn, volunteers with military families, and rarely grants interviews. When she does, her tone is steady, almost stoic. A woman who has made peace with her ghosts. "I used to think my life was a movie," she said. "Now it's just mine. In it one, and perhaps that's the real truth. The one Hollywood never filmed. That Bo Derek story isn't about beauty or scandal, fame or failure. It's about a woman who was seen by everyone, loved by millions, and yet had to lose everything, even herself, to finally understand what freedom means. Today, her legacy isn't in the posters or the beach scene that made her immortal. It's in the quiet defiance of survival. A reminder that behind every perfect image, there's a human being learning to live after the camera stops rolling. Because in the end, Bo Derek's greatest role wasn't the fantasy she played for the world, but the reality she finally chose for herself.